And then if I don't move it in time, let me know.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to this quite special webinar that we're hosting this afternoon here at Brainwaves in collaboration with the Campaign Against Living Miserably. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a really important topic and I think something that we can't support young people enough with in schools and education settings. So today we're very delighted to be joined by Wendy Robinson, who is the Director of Services from the Campaign Against Living Miserably, which I'm going to refer to from this point onwards as CARM, if that's okay. Hi, Wendy, how are you?
Hi, really glad to be here. Thank you.
Could you just tell us a little bit of about yourself in terms of your background with Wendy and what you do at CARM? That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with C.A.R.E for a couple of years now. My responsibility is to work with C.A.R.E to develop and expand its services in the way that we support people. When I get onto presenting, I'll talk a bit more about C.A.R.E, but basically all the ways that we try and help people in a direct or an indirect way. My qualifications in terms of my background, I'm a psychotherapist, children's therapist, family therapist, but I've worked in leadership roles for a long time. Previous to coming to C.A.R.E, I was the head of service for Childline. So my passion around children, young people, and making sure that they can thrive, not just survive, is kind of built into me professionally for a long time.
That's a great phrase. Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Oh, Tara, we're still sharing. Okay, great. And I'd also like to introduce Kristen to our webinar this afternoon. Hi, Kristen, how are you?
Hi, Tracy. Nice to be here. Thank you.
So I do know Kristen a little bit better. She's the deputy head of sixth form at the Cooper School in Oxfordshire. And Kristen's very involved with Brainwaves because she's the Brainwaves lead and is the Cooper School are a Brainwaves research school. So they're involved in a lot of the research that we're doing. You're currently taking part in the cohort study, Kristen, with us, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We were delighted to be able to do that back in April, and the results that we got for that were fascinating. So it's something I've referenced in policy documents going forward, actually. These are the things that we've learned from being part of the research school. And we're completing this survey on Friday of this week as well. So we are in the throes of doing that at the minute. So I'm deputy head of sixth form. I'm an English teacher, Brainwaves lead, which means as well as involving myself in the research part and rolling that out, I also teach the Brainwaves lessons to do with well-being and mental health to the year 12s and the year 13s.
Amazing. So for anybody who hasn't heard of Brainwaves lessons, we do actually have a curriculum that goes through Key Stage 3, 4 and 5. But Kristen and her school have been particularly instrumental in teaching to the sixth form students and sort of feeding back on the lessons and evaluating them as part of being a Brainwaves research school. So anyway, moving on to today's subject, what we are here to talk about today is the C.A.R.E kit. I will get my teeth in a minute and stop. And what the plan is for today is that Wendy is going to speak to these slides for about 40 minutes. And we've got time for questions afterwards and a bit of a chat with Kristen afterwards. As always, you're very welcome to add comments and add to the conversation in the chat. I can see a lot of you have already done that. Thank you so much. But if you'd like to ask us a specific question, there's a button. You'll probably see it with a question mark. It's called Q&A. If you type in any specific questions you want to ask there, then it just helps us keep all those questions in one place for our conversation at the end. So please feel free to use that. We're going to start off today just by asking a quick question about teacher confidence in terms of how confident do you feel supporting young people in your setting when it comes to dealing with suicide concerns. And what you should see is 3 options on your screen. Very straightforward, yes, no, not sure. So we'll just take a couple of minutes to let you answer that. Yeah, let's see what sort of results we've got coming up there. Let me have a look. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple of more seconds. That's wonderful. I can see you all taking part. Thank you so much. Right, let's see what we've got there. I'm going to share the results. So about half of you are feeling not sure, which I think probably is a reasonable place to be in. But quite encouragingly, 40% do feel that, yeah, they are quite confident. So Wendy, Kristen, that's a great place to start, I think. Kristen, just a quick question. As a teacher, what do you find most concerning, about talking to young people about suicide ideation, all these things?
I think as a teacher and a parent and a human being, my biggest fear is making a situation worse. Feeling that I don't have the right skills or the appropriate training to be absolutely certain that anything I say in any given situation isn't going to, as I said, make that situation worse or prompt someone to take negative action. When I first took this job as deputy head of sixth form on International Men's Day, I put together a PowerPoint focusing on men's health, and I rolled it out. I was quite pleased with it. I got it from different charitable resources, and a group of sixth form boys came to me and said, "Miss, that wasn't really very good. It wasn't good enough because it was all about physical health, and you didn't really talk about mental health. And you should have been talking to us about suicide because that is the single biggest thing that young men are worried about at the moment." And these were 17-year-old students, and I hadn't felt that it was appropriate or relevant, or not relevant. It's absolutely relevant, but appropriate. Putting that out in a form time situation, and I was wrong. And they told me I was wrong, and they helped me put something together, which we rolled out the following week. So I think my primary fear is always not getting it wrong. And I think anything that can help us feel confident that we're not going to get it wrong and we're not going to make it worse is beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know you have had instances of attempted and actual suicide with young people close to your school, not necessarily in it. What was the most important things you felt you had to address as a school following those circumstances?
I think the fact that we did talk about it, there were 2 incidences happened at the same weekend, directly and indirectly involving students in our school. And on the Monday morning, we held an assembly in our common room, which is a safe space that our students are very familiar with. And not only did the head come down to talk to the students, but he brought the head of safeguarding. And we are lucky and fortunate that we have school counsellors who work in school, who are in the building, and they came as well. So we had our own sixth form student support manager, counsellors from the school, all of the students, form tutors and deputy heads of sixth form, and we were all physically there in the room, standing in the room, so that the students could see us, could see that we were affected, but hear a very clear message, which is, you do not have to deal with anything that's affecting you alone, that we are here to support you. You are all worthwhile. Your voices will be heard. And students had to leave that setting because they were overwhelmed. They were reflecting on what had happened that weekend, but we were there to catch them. Like literally, there was a member of staff went out with every student that felt they couldn't be there anymore and had those conversations. It also meant we got a real influx of students referring themselves to our student counsellors and the school nurse, and we were able to talk to those students there, and then we were able to put support in place. And I think being visible and having that conversation and saying to them, we are here for you. We acknowledge that this is going to be difficult for you and challenging. You are worthwhile. We want to support you. Please don't feel that there is no other option for you as an individual.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that's the message you would want all young people to receive. So on that note, actually, I think I'm going to hand over to Wendy, and we'll start the slides we'll move on to your next slide, so you can start your presentation, Wendy, and tell us a little bit more about the C.A.R.E kit and how we can use it to support young people. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to say, obviously, everybody's picked up completely now, and probably before when you signed up to the seminar, that we're going to be talking about suicide. So just obviously to take care of yourselves within that. We're specifically speaking about young people and suicide. But the important point to make really about what I'm going to talk about today, but about Campaign Against Living Miserably, whether you've come across us before or not, is that we are uniting the UK against suicide. So our whole work as a charity is around prevention, because we really believe that there's masses that we can all do as individuals, whether professionally or personally, to actually be there for each other if life ever gets to that point where it feels like it's too much or not worth living. Next slide, Tara. Oh, a few jumps there. Tara's very kindly looking after slides for me. You're all teaching professionals are probably much more able to do these talking and the moving slides than I like to be. So thank you, Tara, for helping me with that. So yes, so our real motivation at C.A.R.E is that we, truly believe, and it's not just us, it's Office for National Statistics and the NHS, we all speak about suicide being the most preventable cause of death in the UK. And so if it's preventable, there must be things that we can do about it. And that's really what drives us here at C.A.R.E. Next slide. So our vision is a future in which nobody believes that suicide is their only option. Because when we think about people who do reach that point of feeling like there's no way forward, then that sense that if we are, you know, suicide feels like this is the only way of dealing with what I'm going through, we really work to actually, we talk about it as off-ramps in many ways. We want people to feel that there are many places along that journey that they could get support, and there are other options, and always hope, and always a reason to live. And our mission, therefore, in terms of, says there in our name, doesn't it, to help people end their misery, not their lives. So we operate across what we call a continuum of need. So really it's like our charities for everybody, whether you're at one end where you feel fine, right through to suicidal crisis. And at the feeling fine end, or at the trying to kind of raise awareness end, we do a whole range of campaigns. I'm going to talk a little bit about one specifically today, which is where the C.A.R.E kit kind of grew from, or was the tool within that campaign. We do a whole range of things for people who kind of maybe somewhere in the middle. So we work with sports people, musicians, artists, comedians. Ramesh Ranganathan is our patron. We try and reach people where they are, and also then to give them a sense that if, you know, they are struggling, then we have at the other end of the spectrum, we have a helpline which is there for people 365 days a year, between 5 and midnight every single day. And that's not just for people who might be suicidal themselves, but it's also for anyone who might be concerned about someone who appears to be struggling in that way, or for anyone who's been bereaved by suicide. So just some sobering statistics, just to kind of put everything into context. So in terms of the UK, currently someone in the UK dies by suicide every 90 minutes. And when we think about it wider than that, so that, you know, suicide itself, but actually all of the attempts. So there are at least 200,000 attempts every year, and that's enough people to fill the O2 arena 10 times. So I'm sure you can see from within that why we are so kind of passionate and driven to make a difference here. And when it comes to thinking about young people, and when I'm talking about young people here, this is a crazy wide way of thinking about young people being kind of from the ages of 10 to 24, but that's the ONS kind of statistical range when it comes to thinking about young people. But when also you consider that suicide is the leading cause of death for 15 to 39-year-olds in the UK, it used to be accidents, and it's now suicide. So, you know, these things are kind of their data, their information, but they're information that tell us that this isn't okay. And since 2010, the teenage suicide rate has increased by 64%. So as I said already, that age range 10 to 24 years, you'll have to think about your young people, the people that you're engaged with and responsible for within that. But it is still the smallest number within the wider kind of stats around suicide. So it's at 10%, but it's the rate at which it is growing that gives us most concern. And that's why at C.A.R.E we wanted to kind of really focus our next piece of work and our campaign around young people in particular. So in the last decade, 6,929 young people have lost their lives to suicide. And that was the kind of driving force for us to create a campaign that we launched in September this year, which was called Missed Birthdays. So it was an installation created by ourselves to raise awareness of that, what we consider to be a health and public health crisis. So if in the past decade, 6,929 young lives have been tragically lost, we created an installation to bring this to life. So basically 6,929 balloons to represent a young person who took their own life, and the balloon showed the birthday they didn't get to celebrate. And this is just a visual for you of what that actually looked like. So this was in Westfield Shopping Centre in central London. We wanted to choose a place that would have a lot of footfall, a lot of people walking through, and actually to draw people's attention to it in some way of kind of like something that they couldn't turn away from, because it immediately, as you can see it there, it looks quite celebratory. And there was a pathway, a walkway through, and this was where then people became more aware of what actually the installation was, because as you walked through, there were voice notes that had been left by the families that we'd worked very closely with, that were telling the story about their young person. Now, of course, this had to be done very sensitively and carefully, because whenever drawing attention to anything around suicide, have to be careful not to glamorize it in any way, not to over dramatize it. So this wasn't really about, you know, we wanted the stories to be of where could there be some hope in the stories that would engage people to want to take their part in preventing this, so that in 10 years time we wouldn't have this number of young people to represent in this way. So the stories of hope were from families really saying all the wonderful things about the young person that they had lost, but also the wish that they had for help, and the calling out to others to reach out for that help, you know, when they are struggling. Had massive engagement with the installation. We had partnership also with ITV this morning. They launched it for us, had the sofa there, and they did that in, you know, really sensitively. And I think that's what we're pretty good at C.A.R.E. We're good at making a really big noise about things that need to be loud. And also we were the funding for all of this, just in case anybody's concerned, you know, did we spend money on balloons instead of actually helping young people? So the Iceland Charitable Trust were funding of this. All of the balloons that we used were going to a children's charity afterwards. That's an art and therapeutic charity that were able to use this. Everything that was used was, you know, considered environmentally as well when we made this campaign and brought it to life. And so just to be clear that with behind the balloons, behind each one of those representations, there are some real stories. And as I said already, we worked with some families in very closely who really, you know, came forward to us when we put out a call to work with families in this way. You know, so for example, Tom, who didn't get to celebrate his 24th, Sophie her 22nd, Niall's 24th. And then we were able to kind of build into our website the stories around these young people as well. And we had a great deal of what we call out of home advertising as well to raise the issues. But what we wanted to make sure as well, we're not just pointing to a problem, that we want to provide people with some support. Now, there are quite a good number of organisations that do provide support directly to children. But what we were really focusing on, what we're calling trusted adults, of which you will be part of that group. And we wanted to make sure that trusted adults had a sense of how they could have the conversations, because that's really what we know from all the work across suicide and all the years that C.A.R.E has been in existence. People do fear talking about it. They fear that, and I think Kristen said it in the beginning as well, frightened to say the wrong thing. And therefore, sometimes we don't say anything. And actually, we want to kind of smash a stigma really around suicide, and that talking about it is the most preventable step you can take. So we wanted to give something that really helped people think through how to do that in the best way, and that's the way that the C.A.R.E kit was born. So I'm going to talk now in more detail about exactly what it is, how you might use it, where you can find it, and then we'll have some time for any questions that you might have at the end. So in the first 2 weeks of the campaign I just described to you, we had lots of traction around that, 23 million impressions across social. And the important part really was the C.A.R.E kit that we promoted within the campaign. We had over 50,000 users came to the website. So that in itself tells you that we're hitting on something here, that people are concerned about young people and suicide. And really it's not to scare anyone into thinking that, you know, this is an emergency that can't be stopped. It's a runaway train. It absolutely isn't. And I think it's all about really talking to young people before we get to that point. actually having the conversations in a way that's kind of straightforward, that's about mental health in general and well-being, and how do you cope with stress and how are you getting on at the moment. If you set up that kind of environment to have those conversations, then when you get to that point of concern, then that young person trusts you enough for you to be somebody that they will actually open up to, because it's often, you know, suicide really thrives in the dark. It thrives in that secrecy, in that shame, in that hidden away. So really this is all about shining a light on it. So having trusted relationships with young people so that they know that you know, so that they know you can bear the conversation, so that they know you can have those conversations, you know, and you're not going to kind of like run away from it or overreact or underreact. And that's really what we're trying to do with the care kit. How can we help trusted adults not overreact, not underreact? So yes, next slide, thanks. We've had some great feedback from people as well, but also just to say that the version of the care kit that exists now that you'll be able to access at any point after this webinar, sorry, that is version 1. We've had lots of feedback, lots of user testing, and we're actually now in the process of developing version 2, which will actually be even more interactive, as in the conversation starters and tools, and you'll be able to actually practice conversations. It becomes much more after I think we'll be launching that in January. So when you get to use it and look at it now, you will see that it's got a really good structure, and it'll take you through some very clear instructions. But bear in mind also, there is more to come. So the care kit is there to help you take action to protect the young people in your life from suicide. So speaking to you as a human, as an adult, as a education professional, any of those parts of your life, you can have a role in being there for young people around suicide. So the care kit's full of practical tools and resources to equip you to have those conversations, from introducing the topic all the way across to keeping them safe in a crisis. And care, why we've chosen that word, well, it's kind of based on the idea really that you all care, we all care, but how do we put that caring into action when it comes to suicide and suicide prevention and mental health? So there are 4 vital actions, and I'll expand on these in a moment, but simply put, C is for check in, A is for ask how they are, R is for remain close, and E is for expert help. And what we did as well when we were thinking about this is that not all young people are going to kind of sit within one bucket of that. There are some for whom suicide and the thought of suicide or struggling to that degree is not in any way where they are. But things can happen, and young people can go from a place of being kind of okay to being in a crisis quite quickly. That sense of impulsivity. When I was at Childline before I worked at C.A.R.E, what I noticed there, or what we saw in the rise of young people that came to us were suicidal. Quite often they'd kind of been okay, and then something big had happened. As you'll all know, young people, when something happens to them, it's happening to them for the first time. And that perspective, like somebody who's kind of lived as long as I have, has seen things get bad, get better, get bad, get better. Things happen, you can get help. I think a lot of young people get that extreme sense of something happens for the first time, whether it's a heartbreak, whether it's a bad result, whether it's something that's happened in their family. That sense of perspective kind of isn't there. So young people can move very quickly from prevention, you know, that's okayness into crisis. But we wanted to break it down into, if you are someone who wants to equip yourself to support a young person before things get tricky. Also then early intervention, we're calling that you're worried about a young person. You're not sure exactly in what way and what's going on, but something isn't okay. Then right to the other part of it, which is the crisis part, is you need help to help a young person who you know is in some kind of suicidal crisis. So when you go onto the C.A.R.E Care Kit, that's what you're asked. You'll see this is just a kind of a screenshot of what that first kind of area, once you've gone into the journey, looks like. It asks you to choose which one of those you feel that you might be. As a teaching professional, it'd probably be good to check in with all of them. But then again, it's there if you are only interested in kind of working out what to do in each one of those kind of 3 degrees of need, if you like. I'm just going to take you through kind of what it looks like then for prevention. So back to what care means, C meaning check in. So these are, when you get to the care kit, you can click into each one and it expands. It gives you much more detail for each of those, but I'll talk through them now. So really some really simple things, but I think when we're trying to help people, often we can forget what the simple things are. We can kind of get a little bit in a bit of a panic. So the care kit is a checklist for you in many ways, and you kind of might like look down and go, okay, yeah, totally understand, find a quiet time and space, yeah, got that, okay, create regular times. But if any of the areas you think, oh, I don't quite understand what that means, or I need a bit more guidance, that's where you would click into it and you'll find out much more. And so in terms of the check-in and prevention, speak about mental health, emotions and difficult topics in an everyday way, in a way that is just kind of, you know, so something like, oh, there's a lot in the media currently about young people mental health. What does mental health mean to you? Are there times when you've struggled? Who would you go to if you were struggling? You'll find within the care kit lots of conversation starters like that, because sometimes it's putting things into words that are kind of hard. So, and just a reminder there that talking helps. People have a real worry that if they say the wrong thing, there's only a couple of wrong things, and I'll touch on those. I'll be really clear about those actually in a couple more slides. But most things you can say will not make it worse. You are simply saying, I'm here for you. I would like to talk about something that you might be struggling with. Let's look at it together. That's the overarching kind of premise of this whole care kit, where you're able to say, I don't know everything, but what I do know is I care about you. I don't know everything, but I do know that I'm here for you and let's talk about it. I might not have all the answers, but I'll be able to get expert help if we need it. And that's the kind of the overarching sort of message. But there's some do's and don'ts, as you can see there. Don't wait for them to come to you. It's our responsibility as trusted adults. We talk about people reaching out, but this is very much about reaching in. We need to reach in to young people. Anybody who's struggling, think about yourselves in this scenario, or I think about myself. Often when we are struggling, we don't feel able to reach out. You know, it takes a lot to say, I'm really struggling. So it's about reaching in. Don't wait for them to come to you. You were the one to start these kind of conversations. Don't make it a big deal either. It's about kind of, you know, whether you can build it into kind of lesson planning that you already have that's around well-being or mental health, or even any topic whatsoever. Try and kind of just bring it in regularly and often, mental health, and don't be afraid to say the word suicide. People often really worry about that if I say suicide, it will put it into someone's head, or if it's in their head already, it will somehow trigger them into action. And I'm here to say absolutely clearly the opposite is true. If you say, you know, have you thought about suicide, or what does the word suicide mean to you? Or have you ever known anybody who's struggled with suicide? All of those words shine the light on it and actually burst a bubble. If somebody has got those thoughts and feelings, if you're able to ask them about it, it helps them feel relieved that you get it. And then you can start to have a conversation. But you don't need to make it a big deal. And if you're talking about it early enough, and when it gets difficult, then you're somebody that they can trust. And don't stop trying, even if it's proving tricky. So even if when you first start to talk about this with a young person, they go, I'm not interested, or I don't want to know, or why are we talking about this? Just keep on it. I mean, you've got all the skills in the world, I think, indeed, in managing situations where maybe a young person doesn't want to engage. So make sure that you use all of those skills in terms of this as well. Ask questions and show interest. That's just in general. Again, like I said already about mental health, make sure you build it into that. Try to listen more than you talk. It's not a lecture. You know, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you speak, perhaps. Be patient and allow the young person to share in their own way. Explore how they're feeling and help them put it into words if they can't. And again, in the kit itself, it expands on all of these. I think a lot of the do's you will have down already, because this is how you're going to be engaging with young people in an educational setting. But some of the don'ts might be really good just to remind yourselves. Don't have the conversation when emotions are running high. Don't push them to say more than they want to. Definitely don't promise to fix something when you can't. So if someone's struggling with something and they do share, but it's beyond your ability to kind of manage with some of that or change it, that doesn't mean you can't hear what they've said. It doesn't mean you can't sort of reflect with them on, that sounds really difficult. I can see why you might be struggling, or I can see you don't really want to talk about mental health at the moment, but if ever you do, I'm here for that. So, you know, be generalist as well as kind of not promising more than you can actually deliver. And don't be scared to ask about suicide, as I've already mentioned. Remain close, that's the R in the care kit. So in terms of prevention, early points of contact, just check in easily, regularly. It's not a one and done. This is building it into being regularly. Validate how they're feeling and let them know that you understand what they're going through, and keep the conversation going. As I say, it shouldn't be a one-off. Don't try and go forward with it as if you have all the answers. Definitely don't compare a young person to any other young person. And I think something that you will know all too well is young people can often absolutely hate if we try and relate what they might be going through with what we were going through or are going through. It's just not really relevant. So it's kind of giving full attention really, and not making any assumptions around what their life might be and their engagement in terms of mental health and what it means to them. Expert help, and this is these headings fit whether it's prevention, intervention, or crisis. But if you are concerned about something, you need to act immediately. You also need to make sure that you're connecting young people to other support, that if they're sharing with you, it doesn't become like a secret between you and them, that you're finding out where do they get support from, who's around for them, and making sure that that's something that you're linking in with, so that you're connected with other adults in the young person's life. A lot of things for you as educational professionals be what you do in general anyway. So it's only applying these or expanding that to make sure it's when it involves a mental health issue. Get some advice and help on your next steps too. This is when we'll come into kind of thinking about whether you've got a suicide and mental health policy for your organization, for your school and college, that's really good. You need that guidance. You need a kind of care kit around you as well. And that's where I think those kind of safe policies are really helpful. Don't minimize a young person's worries, even if they seem small and irrelevant or kind of like, you know, easily kind of surmounted. For a young person, they may well not be. Don't think you have to know it all. You absolutely don't. Really, as I said a few times, but just want to stress, is your willingness to engage, your willingness to step into their shoes, or at least stand alongside them to find out what's really going on for them, and let them know that, you know, life can be tough and you're there to hear from them and help them should it get really difficult. And don't think you'll be wasting anyone's time if you reach out for help and advice. You know, that there are many organizations that are there to support, ours included. So, you know, if you've got a concern about a young person, don't keep it to yourself and make sure you speak with others. Intervention goes through similar things, so I'm not going to kind of take you through every one of those, but that's the next step on. So as I said, you've started to be concerned, you do know something's not okay. So in terms of our ask around that, where you can see how now it sort of ramps up a little. So you're showing your concern. You need to let a young person see, I can see you struggling, or you don't seem to be yourself at the moment, or you know, you seem to really enjoy this activity and you've stopped going there. That leads me to be concerned about you. How are things? So it's saying what you see, letting that young person know that you've noticed something, but you've noticed it from a caring position, not that they're not doing enough work, or that they're, you know, not sort of performing accurately, or whatever it is, that you're coming at it from that kind of warmth and that care. And within that, you can ask about mental health and suicide, opening up the conversation, talking about it. And if you've got a gut feeling, if you really feel that something seriously bad is happening, put it into words. As I said, it doesn't scare young people off. It scares them off more if they see we're not able to have those conversations. Because if they really are struggling and you're kind of pussyfooting around it too much, and you're not directly saying what you feel and what you worry about, they will tell you if you've got it wrong. They will absolutely say, what are you talking about? No, of course I'm not thinking of suicide. Or of course, you know, yeah, I'm having a bad day, but it's no big deal. But you need to show them that you can bear it, because if you can't say it, if you don't kind of express that ability to be in that world with them, then when they are concerned, they won't come to you, also, if they're a bit scared about their own circumstance that they're in, or their own overwhelming feelings, if they see you can't cope with them and you're meant to be the adult in the situation, then it will scare them even more. So it's like, gosh, if they can't deal with it, I'm certainly, you know, this is really bad. This is much worse than I thought. So that sense of being calm, there for them, even if at the back of your mind you're thinking, wow, I need some help with this. This is a lot. Showing them that you're there for them just really helps, like with the whole nervous system anyway. So that will in itself be a preventative measure, just having that conversation in those terms. And check for suicidal thoughts. Don't overreact or underreact. Easy to say, sometimes not easy to do, but that's what the Calm Care Kit is there for, to provide that support so you prepare before you have the conversation. Don't jump to solutions either. You know, if somebody shared with you, for example, that they think that, you know, they're in a poor relationship or they're being bullied in some way, sit with that scenario, find out what's really going on, find out what they're feeling like doing as a solution themselves, or what have they done to try and move things on, or you know, don't jump in there telling them, well, try this, try this, try this. It's actually much more about being with the feelings. Don't ask why or criticize. And again, this is, you know, basic stuff for all of you, but that why question is a real sort of it's a bit of a red herring. If you ask why, you can end up going too far down that way. Don't ask why. Just sit with it and find out what's really going on, and don't underestimate emotions either, because this is big stuff if a young person is struggling. So I'm going to now just talk about the suicidal part of it, which is exactly the same. C.A.R.E, check in, ask, remain, and expert help. So if you are concerned around this, it's about staying calm, taking action. You really need to take action. If somebody is in suicidal crisis, it's not something that's just going to go away. Actually helping them through that point. Suicidal ideation is quite common. If someone is in a point of feeling like they want to take action on that, those strong feelings can pass sometimes within an hour. So actually finding out, are they feeling suicidal? Have they planned for suicide? Are they actually thinking about acting on those feelings? These are the kind of things that you're going to be needing to find out a bit more about. Staying with them is absolutely important as well, making sure that they are safe. Even if a young person tells you that they are safe and they're okay, that's not something that you can leave them with. You need to make sure that there's a plan in place for how they're going to be safe in the immediate future. Don't assume someone else has spoken to them. So if you are concerned, it's on you really to find out what you can do about this within a school setting. Of course, it might not be you being the right person to do that, but you need to make sure that you've had the conversation and that somebody is taking action. The don't say this bit, the only thing that you really do not say is don't say something in your way of bringing it up, like you're not thinking of hurting yourself, are you? Or you're not thinking of doing something silly, are you? And then that's just, you know, that's the only thing that you need not say. Pretty much everything else is okay. You can probably tell straight away, as I said, that why you wouldn't say that, because you're kind of giving them the message that they must say, no, of course I'm not. And that's not really opening up the conversation, that's closing it down. Don't minimize the situation. You have to take it seriously if we feel that a young person is in that suicidal crisis. In terms of ask, all the same things again, finding a private space, asking directly, listening closely to validate their feelings, provide reassurance and a commitment to help. When you drop down that box, it will tell you things like providing reassurance around saying things like, lots of people struggle. Suicidal thoughts and feelings happen to 1 in 5 of us throughout our lives. I'm here to support you. There is a way forward. There's help out there. I can help you find it if I can't give it to you myself. That's the kind of reassurance that I'm talking about, not kind of making big promises around being able to remove whatever pressure or stress they might be under. It's more around being able to address kind of how they are in the moment. Don't leave them to manage this on their own. The don't say this is what I've said already, and you need to agree a plan of action. Remain with them gives you ideas around here, because the remain with them and remove anything harmful is a really important one. And this is a message that you need to pass on to anyone that's going to be engaged with them if they're in this kind of crisis. Whether they have a plan or they're just having suicidal thoughts, it's important to stay with them until that crisis has passed. And then in the care kit, there's a link for more information and guidance of the kind of help and immediate support you could get if they're in that place right there and then. So again, just expanding on some of these things. I won't read all of them because you'll be able to find this for yourself later on. But the one thing I do want to go into a little bit in more detail is something called a safety plan, which some of you might have come across, but you might be the first time that you've ever kind of heard that term. So a safety plan, and you have this is a downloadable function within the care kit. So really a safety plan is steps that a person can take when they are feeling suicidal, when they're feeling that they're overwhelmed and they can't cope. And it's something you do with the young person. You talk through with them, people that they can go to, places that they can get the support that they need, so that when they're in that crisis, they have their safety plan and they can act on it. So it's something that you do in partnership with them within the toolkit as well. There's not only the downloadable version as I've shown you here, there's also an example of a completed one, because if you haven't done it before, it can feel a bit like, you know, what does it look like to get it right? So we've provided that as well. Expert help, again, you'll be able to find within the care kit exactly where to get the immediate help, but also ongoing support for a young person who's struggling in this way. So really the important bits around expert helper, that you become the kind of the advocate in the situation. Don't expect to know how to do it all yourself. Make sure you're getting support for yourself as well, especially, you know, if you're being the one there to support them, and build a support network around yourself and around the young person. Don't assume that things will be okay. Immediately, if somebody is in this frame of mind or in this kind of crisis scenario, it can take time for it to be okay, but don't give up hope, because, you know, there are so many stories of people who get into struggle, and if they get the right help at the right time, it actually can be a really transformative and learning experience for them. And actually they take that forward into their future, especially for a young person. You know, if they've been in a crisis and really been helped to resolve that, that's something, as you can imagine, you can take forward and never forget in the future. And this is just an example of, in the care kit, the kind of information with links to various specialist support services for young people around suicide and mental health. So just as a reminder then, this is what we're talking about. Check in, ask how they are, and remain close. And here's a QR code, and we will share the slides with you afterwards. So you can take this now from your screens, but you'll have it in your slides as well. And that will take you straight to the care kit. It will also, the care kit sits within the wider C.A.R.E website. And I'd really encourage you to really navigate around that as well, because there's some fabulous content across a range of things relating to mental health and suicide prevention, not just for young people, for other age groups as well. So please do have a look at that. And like I said, this is version 1 of the care kit. And we're working closely with others now in feedback form to make developments for next year. So key takeaways from today, as I'm kind of drawing things to a close in my presentation. So really see it, say it, do it. That's the way that I would hold it in mind. Be observant, pay attention to any changes in behavior, mood, or habits of the young people around you. Be curious, don't assume the worst, but do look out for things that are out of the ordinary. Educate yourself, learn about the stress in their life and the good stuff. Say it, create the space, talk about everything without judgment or punishment. Ask open-ended questions and ask directly about suicide. Always validate feelings, acknowledge a young person's emotions without dismissing or minimizing them. In terms of do it, model positive behavior yourselves. I think we teach by example so often. So demonstrate your own healthy ways of managing stress and emotions. Seek professional help if the signs persist or worsen. Get help for that young person. Don't keep it to yourself. And of course, visit the C.A.R.E kit, use it, share it, sign up to it. And one final thing that I just want to talk about just here, the terms, I use the term suicide all of the time, but young people have found clever ways to talk about it that won't trigger things in search engines. And these are some of the phrases that you want to watch out for in terms of a young person speaking that might link to them talking about suicide. So you can see them there. Unalive is quite common now, but suicide is one that usually, you know, if you use that in a on TikTok or something, it passes through, it gets through the checks and balances. So, you know, young people are supremely intelligent, aren't they? Always found a language for things. Self-checkout as well can be used as a term. Logging off, escape the simulation, delete my character, take the L permanently, it means take leave permanently, perma-sleep, Alt plus F for myself. I'm not a gamer at all, so these terms mean nothing to me, but Alt plus F4, I think if you're in a gaming scenario, will take you out. And end task and self-die. But there, so there, has anyone else heard of any other phrases? Yeah, please, if you've any that you've heard regularly that are not there. But yeah, so it may be new to all of you, and these are the ways that we have to get ourselves educated to be able to notice when a young person might actually have these issues. So finally, check in and care for yourself and each other. Suicide, you know, it's a worry, isn't it? It's a big thing to hold on to and to try and hold in your hands, if you like, and be there for young people in this way. But, you know, if we get there at the prevention stage, then we've got less people at the crisis stage. Oh, look at that. Alt plus F4 is a close application command. There you go. Thank you, David. Embarrassing myself. I said I didn't know anything about it. I clearly don't, but you can see how that links quite closely, doesn't it? So it you know, young people are smart. They're going to use these terms if it means that it can talk about it without anybody kind of jumping on it as an issue. Another thing as well is I just wanted to give you a link here to Papyrus, are a fabulous organisation that work with young people directly, but they've got a great resource called Building Suicide Safer Schools and Colleges, a guide for teachers and staff. And there's some really good guidance in there around how you could make sure you've got a safe environment with regards to suicide and some policy development around that, which hopefully will be helpful to you. But, you know, finally, just to say we all have the opportunity to be trusted adults, and it's not as difficult as it might feel to talk about suicide. I think we can make it more difficult for ourselves by being afraid of it. But the more we talk about it, the more we've got a chance to work together to end youth suicide for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, so much. I mean, I think the framework is just so reassuring and helpful and well thought through, and a brilliant resource for people who are feeling unsure in this area. Kristen, we talked previously, didn't we, about some of these phrases and how it might be helpful to know what they are. So because if you can put them into your school filters.
Yeah, I've actually just written down a note, which is share terms for suicide with our ICT manager, because these are exactly the sorts of things that we monitor in school, and they will flag, and they're the sorts of things that we as a pastoral team can be notified about. And they're exactly the sort of terms that would trigger a conversation where we would go and find a young person and speak to them and have that conversation as soon as we possibly could. And there were several there that I was not familiar with, and I don't know if our head of ICT is as well, but I will get that list of terms added to our watch list for things in school. Absolutely.
Yeah, so useful. Thank you. I can see there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. If there's anybody else who wants to ask a question, please do type those in, and we'll try and get to those. Kristen, whilst people are doing that, what was there anything within the kit that really resonates with you as a teacher?
Well, first of all, I think it's a fabulous resource, and I will certainly be referring to it, and I will be sharing it widely with the rest of the team and the rest of the people in school. I think just some of the things that we can remember, a couple of things that I noted down, that young people are experiencing things for the first time, and everything feels different and worse and bigger. And I think if we recognise that for them, it is the biggest, most awful thing that's happened to them. And if we recognise that in our language when we're talking to them, I try consciously to validate students' feelings all the time when we're talking to them. But I think this is a situation in which I would feel nervous or anxious if I knew that there was suicidal ideation going on in the background as well. So I think speaking in a way that is every day, asking questions, but showing that your shoulders are broad enough to take it. Because Wendy, I love the point that you made that, you know, we can't show that this is something we're too scared to talk about, because then where does that leave our young people? If we're saying, actually, I'm too scared, worried, anxious to even use that language with you, then it puts it back in the dark. And that's exactly the wrong thing that we should be doing. So I think owning our anxiety and saying, I might not be the best person for you to speak to at this moment, but I will find you someone who is. Let's look at the resources together. Here are the phone numbers that we can use. To say to them, I'm going to use this term with you. I'm going to talk about suicide with you because I'm not too scared of the term. I'm not too scared to talk about it with you, because we shouldn't be hiding when. You talked about shame. And we even know from very recent news reports about people who ended their own lives because they felt ashamed of things that they did and they felt they couldn't talk about that. We know there's a very high profile legal case that's just happened. So I think showing them that you can bear it is a phrase that I will have whenever I'm having a wobble or I feel like I can't. I'm the trusted adult. I need to show that I can bear it and show that we can give them the skills that they can bear it too. So thank you for that. That's something I'm going to be taking forward. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kristen. That's great. So just in terms of a couple of the questions then, Wendy, I'm going to bring these back to you. First one's an excellent one. Where do we stand between a young person possibly talking and confiding to us and building up that relationship, but also our responsibilities for child protection and reporting any possible concerns? Where is that line and how do you draw it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's like if a young person is in the scenario around where they may be about to harm themselves, then you're going into action anyway. I think when you're where young people will sometimes not confide in us is because of that exact fear that if they tell us what they're struggling with, if there's a safeguarding element to it, or they believe that there might be. So say, for example, why they're feeling overwhelmed is that their parents are not getting on. You know, is this their parents are not getting on, or is it domestic violence and abuse that they're being, you know, witness to? There's a whole kind of set of concerns around there. So I think we need to kind of stay in that sort of safe space around what's going on, but really more about how are you feeling? What are you kind of what's the result of the stress that you're under? I think you need to build that relationship rather than get too hung up on tell me exactly what's happening, tell me who's doing what, tell me that part, or the way that we might investigate a safeguarding concern. I think that may come into it, but in the immediate part of acting as a trusted adult in a mental health capacity and suicide, you need to be there for the actions they are feeling like taking because of the struggle or the stress that's going on over here. That will come out if you go into the supporting them around suicide. But I think if you go into the safeguarding bit first, that can actually exacerbate the risk that young person feels that they're under, rather than lower that.
Yeah, somebody just said, as you're being honest about talking about suicide, you need to be honest about possibility of sharing based on the conversation. Kristen, have you got a take on that too?
Yes, I remember asking a question when I was doing safeguarding training of what if a student appears they're going to make a disclosure to me and they say, can you keep this a secret? And I have to say no. The person doing the training said, if a student's got as far with you as getting that close to telling you, the thought that you might have to refer it because you need support and they need support isn't going to stop them. And I think that honesty of, this might be too big for me to deal with, please let's talk and I will help you in any way I can, but you need to know that I might not be the best person and I might have to pass this on. I haven't ever have a student walk away from me in those moments and say, that's it, sorry, I can't tell you anymore. If they've got that far, if they trust you enough to open up themselves in that way, they tend not to go, oh, well, if you're going to let anyone know, I can't have that conversation with you. And I think if you phrase it as, we both might need support in this situation, and I might need to refer it on because I might not be the best person to help you. Students see that, they see your honesty, and as in my experience, it's never stopped a student continuing with the conversation. And I think if we're going to be honest with our students, our young people, we have to let them know that there are things that I'm going to have to pass on, and that's me being honest. And it shouldn't interfere with the trust that you put in me, because everything I'm doing is to keep you safe.
That's really excellent. Thank you, Kristen. That's so helpful. I don't know if any of you might know the answer to the next question. It's, do you know if there are any plans to include a mental health risk assessment pro forma for schools that would support a staff member when they are concerned about a child's mental well-being? Have you got anything from C.A.R.E's perspective, Wendy, or no?
No, I think
Okay,
it's a bit outside our remit. It'd be great if it is happening, if anyone knows more about that.
It's an interesting one. Sorry, we can't answer that one a little bit more directly. But I'm sure you can answer this one, Wendy. Can the care kit be used with adults and older or primary school children?
The principles within it are pretty much standard across whether it's an adult or young person. This is specifically written in terms of the conversation starters and where to go and kind of not to go, specific for that. But I think sharing it as widely as possible, it's got universal application in some respects. So yeah, just use some sensitivity around that.
Okay, thank you so much. There's a quick question in the chat. I've heard that if someone is exposed to suicide, they are more at risk from doing the same thing. Is this something you are aware of? Is it true? What do we know about that, Wendy?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, yes, the risk factor is raised somewhat if someone has had an experience of it in their family or community. Yeah, there's a little bit of kind of, sometimes they call it about suicidal contagion, but that's why in our helpline we're there for people who've been bereaved by suicide, not only to support them in that, but because it is an increased risk factor. So if there's anyone in your environments that do have that happen to them, keep a close eye on them or support them through that, and put it into words to say, sometimes when someone's lost someone in this way, it can make it more likely that they might consider that themselves. Is that true for you? How can we support you? But certainly it is a risk factor.
Okay. And somebody did ask way at the start, is the helpline available from when you're abroad as well, Wendy? Do you know? I can't see why it wouldn't be.
It's available if you're abroad and you're from the UK.
Yeah.
Then yes, you can use it. But it's really for UK residents.
UK, yeah.
The advice that we'd be given is true for this country and not really for others. But there are plenty of helplines in the other parts of the world that's suicide specific also.
Excellent. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Great. Okay, well, it's coming up to 5 o'clock. I wanted to say thank you so much to you both for your help in presenting on this today. It's as I say, I think it's a really worthwhile toolkit that we really hope can help support a lot of young people in our schools. Oh, there's one quick one come in. Is your helpline free and 24 hours?
It's free. It's actually not 24 hours. It's 5 p.m. to midnight, because we were trying to offer something that was kind of outside office hours really for people, or when other services are closed. But yes, it's certainly free.
Great. I have tried to launch another poll, and I'm not sure if it's working. If anybody could tell me, that would be great. It just says, would you plan to try and use the care kit in your school? And I think, Kristen, sharing it wide and far, maybe running a few training sessions yourself would be you can rewatch this video on YouTube. We'll send you the link. Kristen, any other ideas?
I think explore the information yourselves. I think it's one of those things. I know that working with young professionals in the jobs that we probably all do, we are probably quite time poor, but this I would absolutely recommend spending time getting familiar with the resources that are available, because you are going to need it. If you work with young people, you're going to need this information. So be familiar with it before it becomes necessary. And I think the resources are fabulous. I recommend them wholeheartedly. And it's certainly something that we're going to be sharing across the school. So thank you.
Amazing. And I think that's reflected in our last question as well, that 94% of you would plan to use it. So I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much for everybody for voting in that and letting us know. Great news for you too, Wendy, because obviously you want to get this kit as wide as possible. And yeah, so thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us today about this. It's been so worthwhile. Thank you so much. And thank you also, Kristen, for your input as well. That's been your insights. That's been great. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Yeah, we hope this has been really helpful and informative for you. And we'll look forward to seeing you at another Brainwaves webinar very soon. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Goodbye.